Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 10:11, the 14th of December. We do have a quorum. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So we'll go ahead and get started. If anybody would like to make a motion to accept the staff report into record.
I'll make a motion. We accept the staff report for last month's meeting.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the November 9th meeting?
Yes.
Okay. If so, is there any corrections that need made, or would anybody like to make a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. We have a first.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, well, a couple board items from last month, and I didn't know if Megan, you were going to talk about those, what happened in the county commissioners meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you guys know, we had two public hearings last time we met in November, and these were both taken before the Board of County Commissioners. The conditional use for accessory structure exceeding 100% of the gross floor area for Corey Bernard's property. It was approved. They accepted all of the recommendations that were made by you. And then in executive session afterwards, it was clarified that the wall needed to be reset to the property line before the construction permit for that garage will be approved. So that's where we're at with that one. And then the other conditional use was for the amended conditional use permit on the trucks, Love's Travel Center and truck stop for the wastewater system. And through several various meetings, this was ultimately denied at the Board of County Commissioner level. If Eric would like to give a little bit more background on this, I'll let him do so. That's all I have with those, Madam Chair, if you guys
Thank
have
you,
any
Michael.
questions.
So any questions on that decision at all that you have? I'm sure there's a lot. So by statute, you're required when you deny a permit to do findings, fact, and conclusions of law. And so that's what was approved at the last commissioner meeting. So you had the hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and then you had the commissioner meeting, which was, they heard it on there. And then you have 45 days by statute to give those reasons why, you're denying a permit. So they did make an official decision at the last commissioner meeting, which is the first meeting of this month. It was, just to put it all in a nutshell, is basically it was denied because it was an incomplete application and they didn't present evidence that some of the things that came up that didn't come up at the Planning and Zoning Commission that did come up at the Board of County Commissioner meeting. One of them was board just didn't feel satisfied on take for instance on the phosphorus and the nitrates and things like that just weren't presented. I did forward you a copy of the findings of fact and conclusions of law. Now they have a choice of appealing the decision if Love's chooses to do that, or they can now they can't submit an application for 12 months, but they can if it's a substantially different application. So if they, address some of those concerns and things like that that were in that original application, such as public outreach was some of the issues that came up, then they can present another application. So you may see it again. You may see it in a year, and you may see it sooner than that, depending on their response. So we're just waiting to hear back what they have 30 days from that first meeting in December. That's their decision. And if they don't do that route, then they can go another route. So any questions?
No, thank you. I know both you and John worked very hard on getting that prepared. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and the Planning and Zoning Commission did an excellent job. There were some differences between hearings. A lot more public showed up at the Board of County Commissioner compared to what you guys had. So there were some things that were different. So if Okay, John, do you want anything? Okay, I think we're good. John's like, nope,
Yep, I'm done.
we're done.
Tap
Okay.
out. Perfect. Thank you. We're going to wait 1 second here. There we go. Awesome. All right, we will go ahead now that we have everything up and running, go ahead and move into the first hearing. We have one of three today, or we have three, so this is one of three. The first public hearing, number one, is Casey Bruder for a zoning map amendment from agricultural and R2 mixed to agricultural. So I will turn it over to you, Megan.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Nope, maybe. Good thing you didn't leave, right?
Yeah, that's why I sat back.
Yeah,
there.
thank you.
Madam Chair, while we're waiting for that, so just so you're aware, I have some people online. They'll be presenting for the Project Bison project when we're done with the public hearings, the three public
Perfect.
hearings that we have. And so just let's make sure we talk in the microphones. They are having trouble hearing online, so.
Okay.
But we'll get to the introductions when the time comes for that, but just so they're aware too, because I don't think they've seen the agenda. And then there was an issue with them. There's been an issue technically with everything, with the meeting ID and everything. So,
Wow.
so anyway, but we are live on YouTube and here we go. So hopefully we can.
Get going.
Let's try to sit back here for a minute.
All right, there we go. We're good.
All right, thanks everybody for your patience with this one.
Normally it's pretty seamless, so it's all good.
Okay, our first public hearing today is a zone map amendment on land that Casey and Amanda Bruder own. It's southeast of Rock Springs, located kind of off of Highway 430. You drive on County Road 39, Sweeney Ranch Road, just kind of keep driving on there. That's roughly where it's located. It's an approximately 32-acre tract of land that's located out there. Currently, the property is zoned ag and has about an acre and a half that is currently zoned R2. The request came to our office to rezone the whole entire 32 acres to agricultural property. In doing so, the request would meet the minimum district size for agricultural zoned property being 80 acres. As you can tell in the zoning map, the property to the north and to the south and everywhere else around is 88 or is agricultural land. So we're good with minimum district size there. Properties adjacent are rural residential. And just a little bit of background, the reason why this is a split zone as the way it is due to old regulations that needed to, or that happened in the past. If you had agricultural land that you lived on but wanted to put a mobile home on, you had to put it on a residential piece of property, hence the R2 that's out there. This is no longer the case. You can still use the land as for agricultural purposes and also live on the same residence. So in essence, we're again cleaning up spot zoning that had taken place due to older regulations. As you can see, Mr. Zimmerman puts the public notice out and posted, and you can see the pictures above. And we'll jump right into the 6 criteria that we use to go over a zone map amendment. The first being, is this amendment consistent when compatible with the current resolution and comprehensive plan? Staff finds that it is, as it is encouraging county residents to develop areas in growth in an orderly manner, in locations that contribute to the economic and social well-being of all county residents. Criteria number 2, we find that this proposed zoning is suitable for the existing topography and does help to clean up, does help to make this property be a little bit more buildable, not confining to where the house has to go on the property by making it all one contiguous zone. Criteria number 3, the proposed zoning is compatible with existing and allowable uses. As I've gone over before, it's surrounded by other agricultural zone property and rural residential. We would be again cleaning up spot zoning in this area by taking it from 2 zones to 1. Criteria number 4, the proposed zoning can demonstrate adequate public facilities, roads, drainage, potable water, sanitary sewer, police and fire protection exist or will serve to exist the request at times such facilities are needed. This has been existing property. People have been living out there for several years prior to Mr. Bruder and the rest of his family moving out there. So existing facilities are already located on the property. And the amendment shall not adversely affect adjacent properties, communities, to the health, safety, and welfare of residents of Sweetwater County. Staff does not foresee any adverse effects on adjacent properties, and we've not received any negative comments for this public hearing either. And last criteria, does this request conform with all applicable provisions of the zoning resolution? And staff finds that it does. We did not receive any comments from public or agencies, so that is good. And staff recommends approval of this zone map amendment. That's all I have for this public hearing, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant here? Yes. Do you want to come up and introduce yourself? And is there anything you would like to add to Megan's presentation?
Yeah, my name is Casey Bruder, and I appreciate Megan's help on preparing this. Before we bought the property, we had reached out to kind of verify what we could do with the property and how it was zoned. And it was our understanding that like where we want to build a future house right now, there's just a single wide mobile home on there. And we would want to build a house near that, but it would be right on the border of what is now 2 different zones. And so we had reached out to see if it would be possible to get those zones moved, and she kind of recommended that we just have it all agricultural, which would be advantageous to us to be able to build and use the property as we wanted. So that's what we're after today. I appreciate you taking the time to hear us.
Perfect. Does anybody from the board have any questions for Mr. Bruder? No? Okay. Thank you so much. At this time, we'll go ahead and we'll open it up to public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that is in favor of the zoning map amendment? If there's anybody against, if they would like to come up. Or just like to say something in general. These are the fun times of meetings. Perfect. So hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion. We'll open it back up to the board to see if anybody has any questions, comments, anything for Megan or Eric or Mr. Bruder. Pretty straightforward, and it would eliminate a spot zoning problem that we have. So I am for it. No? Okay. Hearing none, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the zoning map amendment, agriculture and R2 to agricultural.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
I have a first and a second. Any final comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you so much. All right, we'll go to public hearing number 2 for a variance of lot 2 for John and Rita Isaacson subdivision. It is part of the Sweetwater County zoning resolution, and we will hear public hearing number 2 now.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This hearing and the next public hearing are going to kind of go hand in hand. First, we're going to hear the variance for the lot depth to width ratio that's being missed by just a little bit on one of the lots in the proposed subdivision. And then the following hearing, again, is going to be the preliminary plat actual hearing. So I'm probably going to give more background information on this one, just so that we can understand the full scope of things. And if I need to slow down or separate things out, please just let me know on this. But John and Rita Isaacson own about 36 acres out north of Rock Springs. It's just south of Double J subdivision. They have owned this property for several years, and they are proposing to subdivide it into 12 lots, keeping the larger lot for where their home currently resides on the west side of the property. And then the variance is for the lot 2, which just southeast of that rather large lot 1. We barely miss the ratio of 2.5 to 1. We're about a 2.66 to 1. So we're super close, but wanting to make sure there's no problems in the future. That's why we're here at this point in time today. Most of the lots on the proposed subdivision range in size from 2 acres to almost 12 acres, but most being much closer to the 2 acre size. No access will be allowed for any lot within the subdivision off of Double J Road, which is the road that brings you off of Yellowstone. Everything must have access off of the proposed Appaloosa Drive. This also includes lot 1 in which John and Rita would be residing in. And we will jump right into the criteria. I did, just trying to learn from past presentations with you guys, I did just sketch it up real quick. And as you can see, the lot is still plenty buildable. The reason why we have a lot depth to width ratio is just to try and avoid really skinny lots that are hard to build things on, whether it's a home, but adding additional structures and things like that. But we do not see any problems with this proposed lot 2. And we've got 3 criteria for reviewing a variance. The first being there are special circumstances or conditions fully detailed in the commissioner and board's findings, which are peculiar to the land or building for which a variance is sought and do not generally apply to the land, building in the neighborhood and have not resulted in any act of the applicant subsequent to the adoption of the zoning resolution. As I've stated before, proposed lot 2 has a depth to width ratio of 2.66 to 1 instead of the 2.5. So we're just, again, barely over that threshold. Every other lot in the subdivision meets this threshold. This is the only one that doesn't. Criteria number 2, for reasons set forth fully in the commissioner and board's findings, the circumstances or conditions are as such that the strict application or provisions of the Sweetwater County zoning resolution would deprive the applicant of reasonable use of their land or building, that grant the adjustment is necessary or reasonable use thereof, that the adjustment is granted as the minimum adjustment that will accomplish this purpose. Going to sound like a broken record here, but all other lots in the subdivision, the other 11 lots are good. It's still considered a buildable lot by county standards. We don't really have any concerns, more just making sure we get everything taken care of as much as we can before we get to the final plat stage for this subdivision. And the third criteria, granting of this variance is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning resolution and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. Staff does not see any harm being created on adjacent property owners, anybody else that would be living in the subdivision. It's a rather small variance request in my opinion. We did not receive any public or agency comments for this variance, and as such, staff recommends approval. And that's all I have for this hearing, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Are you here on behalf of the applicants? Would you like to come up and add anything or introduce yourself at all? Perfect.
I'm Eric Harris with WHS Engineering, and on behalf of the Isaacsons, this is we're excited about development. I'm always excited about development, and I believe that changing this lot 2 in any way would actually put a hindrance on the Isaacsons as it would develop unusable land, and so developing this lot as is ideal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. If there's anybody in the public that would like to say something in favor of the variance of lot 2. If there's anybody in the audience opposed or would like to say anything in general. Hearing none, we'll close the public comment portion and open it back up to the board. Does anybody have any questions on the board for Megan or the applicant? I don't see anything crazy. I don't. And I'm with you, development is always good. Okay. Hearing none, would anybody like to make a motion for the variance on lot 2 of the zoning resolution with the lot depth to width ratio?
I'll make a motion. We grant the variance on lot 2 for this subdivision.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Any final questions?
So with this variance, I guess if we don't approve 3, then it would just go away for, right? If we approve it in this one, and I don't see it happening, but.
Madam Chair, I would say that if the variance isn't granted, then we would have to have the applicant go back to the drawing board to see if there's another
And table the,
option out there, and then table the preliminary plat hearing.
okay. Does anybody have any other questions before we call for a vote? No? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. And we will move into public hearing number 3 for, again, John and Rita Isaacson for their preliminary plot plan.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go a little bit more into detail on this one. Again, we're still dealing with the same roughly 37 acres tract that John and Rita Isaacson own just south of the Double J subdivision north of Rock Springs. It's currently zoned R2SF, which is single family residential, and it does have a minimum lot size overlay of 2 acres All of the lots, as stated in the previous hearing, are 2 acres and above, so we're good on all fronts there. Infrastructure that's in the area, 10-mile water and sewer is the providing district. But there will be individual septic out there just due to soils in the area. Fire District 1 is the responder, and Rocky Mountain Power will also service electrical to the property. And the proposed access is a proposed county road, Appaloosa Drive, which is accessed off of Double J Road. As you can see, most of the other properties in the area are zoned R2SF. They have varying lot size overlays on top. Some of them are 2 acres. The ones on the west side of Yellowstone are actually for 35 acres. These are just a few things that have been done in the past, but don't have a big effect on this subdivision. And we'll just keep going on this one. Mr. Zimmerman has posted both public notices out on this property. And because we are here today, just a reminder to you guys that the preliminary plat will only be heard before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And it doesn't actually make it to the Board of County Commissioners until the final plat stages. When we put out for agency and public comments and adjacent landowners, we did not receive any comments back. The only people that were commenting on it was the staff. And the first comments I'll go over are from Public Works Director Gene Legursky. These are comments that he would like to see addressed at the final plat stage. He doesn't see a problem having them go through to get to that point. The first being drainage for lots 9 through 11, which is that kind of those lots in the center of the U of the Appaloosa Drive. They need to be reconfigured so that the lots do not drain onto each other. His second point was the existing access for lot 1 will need to be removed completely and changed to accessing onto Appaloosa Drive, the proposed county road that will be added into this subdivision. Number 3, need to add a note to the final plat that states no direct access from lots 1, 7, 8, and 12 will be allowed onto Double J Road. Please remove the note under the property information that states lot 1 will directly access off of Double J Road. Going a little bit of background on this, I think we're going to get into the access for lot 1 a little bit further in the hearing, but the reason being for all the accessing being proposed off of the Appaloosa Drive is that the Appaloosa Drive is going to be a local road. So trying to keep as much traffic as we can on a local road and not a it's not collector. What's the other one? It starts with an A.
Arterial.
Arterial. There you go. Thank you. My brain just went blank. Both Yellowstone and Double J Road are arterial roads. So whenever you try to plan ahead for future development and things like that, and having new development coming in in which all lots of the subdivision will be able to have access off that road, that is definitely more of a safety standpoint that the county sees is definitely preferable. Back to Gene's comments, the radii and curves 1 and 4 for the roadway will need to be a minimum of 30 feet. This can be addressed in the construction drawings at final plat. 5, the 18-inch CMP under the Appaloosa Drive will need to be verified per the drainage report that they are adequate in handling the 50-year storm. 6, no utilities or utility appurtenances, including valve boxes, meter pits, fire hydrants, pedestals, etc., will be allowed to be located within the roadside ditch. This includes the front and back slopes of the ditch. This is trying to protect the county and maintenance of further things in the future, just making sure all utilities will be installed in the 10-foot easements that are shown on the preliminary plat. And please change the road cross slopes of the typical drawing from a 2% to a 3%. This change shall be reflected in the construction drawings as well. And I had 4 relatively minor comments, just trying to make sure things are cleaned up at the final plat stage as well. Please label the right-of-way width and book and page for Yellowstone County Road 58 on the plat. Please also add the zoning notation to include R2SF and single-family residential with a minimum lot size overlay of 2 acres. Please also change the 10-foot utility easements on the west and north boundaries of the subdivision to 15-foot utility easements. This is per Sweetwater County subdivision regulations. We're okay with the 10-foot being on either side of the Appaloosa Drive, but everywhere else they need to be 15 feet. And then the last is, please note the double J road distance for the right-of-way and documents in a similar fashion to how it's noted on plat 557, which is the double J subdivision. A little bit of background here: when Mr. Fritz developed that double J subdivision, John and Rita Isaacson gave 40 feet of their property to develop double J road. So part of the dedication was given with that double J subdivision plat. And then the rest of it was given from the Isaacsons in hopes that they would, in the future, which brings us here today, that they'd be subdividing their own land. As far as staff recommendations go, staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat with the following conditions being addressed on the final plat. And it's, I just put everything that Gene had in his comments and everything that I had in my comments. So there's, I believe, 11 items on the conditions for that. That's all I have on this one, Madam Chair. I do think Eric is probably going to have some concerns that the applicant has in regards to access for the proposed lot 1.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So because the applicant is concerned about the removal of the access. I've received some emails on that. So on condition 2 there, the existing access, maybe Megan, if we can show that lot so that Planning and Zoning Commission can see. And we might need to pull up some aerial photography so that and then we also have Mr. Legursky, the Public Works Director, online too. But if you go down, okay, so there's the road coming off of Yellowstone Road, which exists. That's the arterial road, and that's the concerns. And that obviously you want on an arterial road, which is you're getting into your highways and freeways and things like that, that you want less accesses off of there. So on there you can see, I believe that's the existing access, correct? Okay, so you can see, we actually don't need to pull up the aerial photography, but you can see kind of where my arrow is coming down. That is where the existing access came off of. To the north, could you go up just a little bit? It doesn't show it on there, but
It's about right here. I don't know if you can
yes,
see my cursor.
it's a little bit,
It's directly
it's offset,
across.
isn't it? Yeah. So there is another access off of there. So what Mr. Legursky in his comments is that the access be removed here from Yellowstone Road and then place in a new access off the new proposed road. So I just want to point that out to the Planning and Zoning Commission for information, point of information, so that you understand what they're looking at. So, and I'll have the applicant's engineer get up and state their concerns of moving it. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank
And
you.
Gene, Mr. Legursky, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just a little bit of background, if I can. When you look at that, most people don't take that as a concern. Back in 2001, 2002, when both those accesses were installed, Double J Road wasn't a road. It just came off of Yellowstone Road, and then it branched into those 2 lots. When Mr. Fritz did the Double J subdivision, the reason why his approach was allowed to stay there is because he had no direct access onto Windsview Drive. It was even considered to put an access easement between the lots to get to Windsview Drive, but then the previous county engineer thought that that was a little ridiculous. So they allowed that to happen. the access for the Isaacsons was never moved because they never had plans to do that subdivision at that time. So therefore, once the subdivision came through and there's a local road, it is better to allow people to access onto a local road and then have controlled access on an arterial road. A very good example of this is it doesn't look like it now, a lot of traffic, but if everybody can remember or has driven through Stasnos Ranch, that's exactly what happens in 40 or 50 years. You know, none of us will be around, but I can tell you from my guys out there plowing right now and doing different stuff and having people jut out in front of them at varying distances and varying speeds. It's a challenge. If you look at Yellowstone Road should be 55 miles an hour all the way through there, but because of all the accesses and everything, we have to choke an arterial road down to 35 miles an hour to get through Stasnos Ranch. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. Not right now, but sometime in the future. Thank you.
Jean, are you staying on the meeting for a little bit?
Yeah, I will.
Okay,
I'll be
okay,
on
okay.
until this is done.
Okay. Would you like to come back up and address some of the issues or? Yeah, explain. Perfect. That would be good.
Well, the Isaacs are primarily concerned that it's causing a hindrance to their economic benefit of this subdivision. They, when they built this access, they spent a pretty penny developing the perfect approach. I talked to them a little bit about perhaps developing an access point, but not necessarily the road to the Isaacson's house. Just because this would be, I mean, at this point, development is difficult as costs go up and as we learn about how, you know, they're going to be able to sell, they're going to have to sell these lots for a certain X amount of money. And doing the economic based analysis of this, we need to know exactly how much they'll be receiving. And they're afraid that this developing this approach to Appaloosa Drive will hinder their development further. And while there is an access point from the northern development, they feel that keeping their access point where it is shouldn't cause a hindrance temporarily. And I was hoping to find some sort of solution, maybe a middle ground, where we'd be able to keep this drive, or that we'd be able to help with moving their driveway, because they do have this access permit, and actually the access is for Yellowstone Road. Their access permit is for Yellowstone Road because Double J Road was not there when they have this permit. And I was hoping we'd be able to keep them at least temporarily on this Double J Road as an access point.
There, keep lot 1 on Double J.
Yes, and perhaps developing in the construction documents an approach to lot 1, but not limiting. So they would have essentially have 2 approaches, but because they have developed this road that leads to the approach to Double J Road, letting them keep that. And then when it comes time to maintain that road, to move it over to the approach to Appaloosa Drive. Awesome. We have started on construction documents, and we are trying to hit all the other comments. So if there's any other comments on, or any other questions on the other comments, feel free to ask.
I just want to be a little more clear. So
Okay.
you want to keep that access until the Appaloosa and then look at maybe getting rid of it once you've created the other one
Yes.
after it's all been done?
So the comments specifically state that no access point shall be allowed onto Double J Road. Period. And so, yes, it's right now it's in the future, it will become an arterial road. But right now it is, as is, it's a collector. And so we're hoping to be able to,
And I'm just trying to narrow it down.
yeah,
The day that Appaloosa Road exists, then you have time to build your access to Appaloosa, and then that one would go away.
They're hoping to maintain that access, or at least permission to use that access for a longer period until the road degenerates with time. And then when the maintenance of their access point, they would spend that maintenance developing the access to Appaloosa. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yes and no, because I
Yeah.
just, I guess I don't understand how they feel like it's going to be a hardship financially for them to, I mean, yes, it is another access point, but if it was a brand new subdivision and there was no access, they would have had to do it either way. So I'm not sure why they feel like it's a
Perfect.
hardship that way to move that access.
Perfect. Their house resides almost directly where it says lot 1. Or you can see the development of a driveway that long. According to John and Rita, it costs them approximately $50,000 to develop that long of a road. They would have to spend an equivalent amount of money to develop it back to Appaloosa Drive. And not only that, but then you have with the access point, then grading and everything else that comes with it, it just adds a little bit more, and they are hoping to eliminate unnecessary costs, because those unnecessary costs do add up in development.
So I'm taking Appaloosa Road. None of this infrastructure been built, correct?
None.
So I know a little bit about moving dirt and building into a road here. You're not talking a whole lot of expense. If you're going to build this road and gravel it to the county specs, to go from Appaloosa to their existing structures, that's what you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
It's not that big of expense on the grand scheme of things. I know it's still an expense. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
But I also see the county's point, the less access, egress is into a county arterial road, it's a pain. I'm with Gene on this. I've worked around this. It's a pain. I don't think it's going to be that huge of expenses when they put the Appaloosa Road in, so putting an approach into theirs. I kind of agree with the county on this one. Just because I do know you're talking about the expenses, the hardship, the cost. Really, it's not, unless you have, I'm looking at your grading here on your map. I don't know how much, if it's you don't have any contours, elevations on here. So I don't know if you're talking, if it's a cliff they have to cut through, which is a huge cost.
Mhm.
But if you're not showing any elevation, so I don't really know. Well, you could tell us, I mean,
There's not a extreme elevation there.
okay.
The proposed access would skirt an existing horse corral, and they'd have to move a lot of equipment that they have stored back there. And
But for safety, I'm sorry, I just don't get it. I do tend to agree with Mr. Legursky on this one, because the access off of Yellowstone on that corner right there. I just had here just a few years ago, we took care of part of a road out by my shop. It came in at an angle like that. It's hard to see. And you're coming in there at an angle, almost at a 45-degree angle, turning around, look, and people coming off that road. It is a safety issue. It really is. Not only for them, but for the people driving up and down that road.
I agree. Mark,
That's-
did you have?
yeah.
Well, I can add, being out there, I'm just to the south of this development here a little bit, and there is a rise on that road out there on Yellowstone. And just coming in off of Jackman Access, there's mornings. Because believe me, they're doing 55 when they're going past that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just coming off of that, I know it adds to the traffic there. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with Gene as well. I think, unfortunately, I'm sure they have a very good road going into their place right now, and they hate to have to disturb that or get rid of that. But I think with all this new development, with the new road and everything else, I think that's something that they could probably they could absorb.
And there is a possibility. They have 4 to 6 inches of road base on their existing road. You can repurpose that. You have your contractors going to build that road. They can actually take that gravel off. And granted, you're not going to get it all, but you can get a good portion of it. Depends on how thick it is. They could reuse that. So that is always an option too for cost.
Is far as the other conditions, I know he's not super happy about that. As far as the other conditions, easements and different things of that way, is that something that will be able to be addressed easily?
Oh,
Bill?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, very
okay.
easily.
Okay.
There's no
The
concerns.
biggest
with
comment
anything.
or the biggest is number 2. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We'll go ahead at this time and open it up for public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that is for the preliminary plot plan.
Madam Chairman, this is Gene Legursky. Can I have
Yes,
Megan pull up the aerial for just a second?
yes, please.
Give me 1 second.
Can you go to the county GIS, Meg, please?
Provided I can get the internet to work in here.
Oh, Gene, she's had technical difficulties
Yes,
today.
it's been a day.
I had, yep.
Computers is gonna make our life easier, right?
If we zoom in on Isaacson's property right here, you'll notice a road that currently goes off to the right, to the east. That could be their existing access onto Appaloosa Drive. That's all I'm saying. There's, Eric and I've discussed this a couple times, and my main concern, like I said, is the safety on Yellowstone and the safety on Double J. So, like access is kind of already there. So I'm not arguing that it doesn't cost money, and I understand development and every penny counts, especially when your costs are doubling every year. However, in the access or the interest of safety and everything, I think, maybe that road could be, or the trail that goes off east to west can be repurposed into their actual access in their driveway.
And Gene, I do have one other question. This does, you would be able to answer. Your Appaloosa Drive road, I guess it'd be towards the east. How come it doesn't line up with the existing one across the street?
We would like it to, but in our standards, we have a standard that says basically if you have two approaches onto our arterial drive that are roads that are X number of feet apart, we will allow it. Great planning would be to line those up, but because of the lot configuration and everything that the Isaacsons wanted on their lot, we allowed them to shift it down, and they do meet our requirements as they're written.
Okay.
Okay.
I have no other questions for you. Okay.
Okay, we'll open it back up to public comment if there's anybody opposed in the audience. Anybody in general that would like to comment? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment and open it back up to the board for any further questions, comments. Jean, I just had a comment as far as like, I know we're taxed is already on trying to get county roads plowed and this and that, and which it is what it is, but adding a whole nother drive like on Appaloosa, is that something that, yes, we can maintain and continue to maintain?
Yes, we'll accept this road, or, well, I will advise the Board of County Commissioners to accept the road after the 1-year warranty for county maintenance for Appaloosa. That doesn't, it bothers us. We've added about 80 miles of road, and we've cut 12 employees from Road and Bridge. However, that is a local road, and out in this area, Yellowstone will get taken first, and that's first priority for us. So, once Yellowstone's road, it's just like in a city. Once Yellowstone's taken care of, we start moving out into the different collector roads, basically the old fire lanes, and then we hit all the local roads last.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments? I am with Casey and Mark and Jean. I know it's unfortunate. it is, but, and it is a little bit of a ways, but I don't know how to get around that because it is a safety issue. So. Anything else? Would anybody like to make a motion to accept the preliminary plot plan as presented with the conditions that are stated?
I make a motion that we approve John and Rita Isaacson subdivision preliminary plat with staff recommendations as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. Any final questions, comments for anybody while we're here? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you so much. All right, we are moving right along. I know we have Project Bison, an update, and they are on the phone and going to give us a presentation, I do believe, of something. So I'm excited to hear about this. So I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So online on Zoom, we have Patricia Loria. And as you know, there's a project called Project Bison. Everyone received a mailer about that a few months ago. They've done a really good job of public outreach. I actually went to two city council meetings. They presented to the city of Rock Springs, Green River. They've also presented in front of the town of Granger. So I really appreciate their public outreach, what they've done, taking it very seriously. I encouraged them to reach out to the Planning and Zoning Commission. As you know, an injection well will require a conditional use permit, which will be heard before you, before the Planning and Zoning Commission, if the property that they choose is within the unincorporated areas of Sweetwater County. So Patricia, if you can hear me, I'm just going to turn the time over to you and maybe give you time to introduce everybody you have on there.
Yes, and it'll be Megan Kenny from our side who is doing the presenting, but thank you so much. Again, my name is Patricia Loria. I'm a VP of Business Development at Carbon Capture Inc. We are, excited and hopeful to bring a direct air capture project into the county. As Eric said, we are really trying to be thoughtful about engaging with the community to ensure that this is a project that they see will be a benefit to the community in terms of kind of jobs and opportunities. We do have a community council that includes many local businessmen, people from Western Community College, as well as a K through 12 kind of superintendent and some environmental NGOs. So again, we are trying to be kind of very thoughtful in terms of how we interact with the community. It's still early stages. As Eric said, we have not kind of finalized where the first modules will be located. And those are kind of all things that we can kind of continue to update the group on. But Megan did have a short presentation that she will go through to kind of walk you through, what our process has been and what we know and what we're still working on.
And I'm sorry, Eric, you will have probably now seen this 3 times since it is the same presentation from last week. I also just want to note that we have someone from our sequestration partner, Frontier Carbon Solutions, online as well. Alicia, I'm not sure if you have a couple of pages as well, but happy to kick off the conversation a little bit in terms of what we're doing and then hand it over to you. Oops, sorry, going a little too fast. So first, just a quick introduction to some of the people on our team. You've already met Patricia. My name is Megan Kenny. I'm the Director of Strategy and Projects and will be kind of the primary point of contact for anyone in the community going forward. Unfortunately, Rob White couldn't stay for the remainder of the call. He is our VP of projects. And I think also on the line, we have Jeremy Hines, the senior project engineer on our team. So we are the team that is primarily focused on Project Bison specifically and can answer kind of any questions that you or the rest of the community have about where we are in this project. A little bit about us as a company. We are primarily based, I'll take a step back. We are a direct air capture company. We make modular machines that take excess CO2 out of the air. We are primarily based in Los Angeles, though we have a few team members that are kind of scattered in other parts in the US and a couple of people from Canada. We're privately funded and have raised about $43 million to date after we raised a Series A little over a year ago. The focus of our strategy is on developing modules that are flexible and upgradable. If we have time or if people are interested, we have a little bit about what that means in practice in the back. We are, for the time being, focused on US projects, especially after the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act. The sort of finances associated with doing projects in the US is pretty attractive for companies like us. And back in September, as you may have seen, we announced what we intend to be the world's largest atmospheric carbon removal project in Sweetwater County. So a little bit more about Project Bison and kind of how this will start working in practice. The primary way that we as a company will make money is by selling carbon removal credits based on the amount of CO2 that we take out of the atmosphere to third-party companies. And by collecting 45Q subsidies, that has been increased to about $180 per ton after this pass of the IRA. Our primary customers that we are working with are any number of companies that have decided to be net zero and can't necessarily get there through operational changes. So these are unavoidable emissions for them. We are working with a number of different partners in this space. One of them is on this call, Frontier Carbon Solutions on the sequestration side. But another major partner for us to call out is Fluor, who is our EPC during this work. I will also note, because I think you can see on the image on the right, energy is going to be a big factor for us as well. We will likely be working with a combination of Bridger Valley Electric, the co-op in the area that is closely located to where we will likely site phase 1 of our project, but I've also been in several conversations with Rocky Mountain Power as well. And then finally on this, there are a number of different reasons why we chose Wyoming, but a couple of them on this slide. Very attractive geology. The space is very good for CO2 storage, and there's been a lot of work to date by places like the University of Wyoming. The regulatory environment specifically related to primacy and granting of Class 6 injection wells. And I think a big one for us as well is the prevalence of relevant energy industry job skills, which we think are highly transferable to the work that we're going to be doing in this space. So a little bit about kind of like what this project looks like in the numbers. We see this project as being deployed in about 4 phases, each approximately 2 years long. As you'll see here, this is probably going to be pretty small to start. So by the end of 2024, we are hoping to deploy 10,000 tons of capacity of our direct air capture modules. To give you a sense of what this actually looks like in practice, the form factor of our modules is about the size of a 40-foot high cube shipping container, and 10,000 tons a year of these is approximately 20 shipping containers. These likely can be stacked, and so it wouldn't necessarily be 20 shipping containers each sitting on the ground. They could be sitting as many as 3 high. For this initial deployment, we are probably going to need around 5 acres of land. And from a job perspective, because it will still be pretty early days, we will likely only be hiring for kind of initial roles. As we get a bit larger, kind of culminating in 5 million tons of deployment by the end of 2030, we will need quite a bit more land, probably around 160 acres. I will note that if people in this audience may have seen previous numbers before, I think we've shared numbers like 100 acres. We are aiming to be somewhat conservative, and kind of our knowledge is changing as we do a little bit more work with Fluor on the engineering of sort of both our modules and the rest of the equipment that we'll need to deploy. I will say that in line with sort of this phase deployment, we also have our own internal technology roadmap about how we expect our modules to change. And one of those significant changes will be an increase in improvement in the efficiency and capacity of our modules. If we can hit that technology roadmap, I think that these land numbers become quite conservative and could come down significantly. But for now, we are aiming to be conservative. One other thing that I will note is that this is land for our direct air capture module use only. We do need to consider land that we will need for the energy to power these systems. And so, as I mentioned, are in active talks with both Bridger Valley and Rocky Mountain Power, and we'll give this group and the community updates as soon as we know more about what that looks like as well. In terms of initial perspectives on timing, this is timing for just phase 1 only, and these are subject to change. But after the holidays and starting in the beginning of the new year, we're going to be engaging in land discussions primarily for this first 5 acres, but if possible, start scoping out what's available for us as we need a bit more land in phases 2 through 4. And then we'll move in sort of the surveying and studies that we'll need in order to engage in the permitting process. I think we are aiming to begin sort of site preparation for the first couple of modules by the beginning of next year, and aim to site and commission the first 2 modules to begin first injection by the end of next year. It's likely that site preparation will continue through some of 2024. That might not be all on-site work. It may include, as it says here, some off-site fabrication and piping and things like that. But we'll aim to commission and begin injection on the balance of our phase 1 modules by the end of 2024. I think one major thing for us to note here is that we are deeply committed to the state generally and this community in particular, and would like to call that out in kind of 3 main values here on transparency, dependability, and preservation. On the transparency side, I think we are aiming to engage with the community and different stakeholder groups, including yourselves, in a variety of different ways. Patricia mentioned our Community Engagement Council that is meeting monthly, where we are basically seeking to get as many perspectives from the community as possible. We are also engaging with a number of stakeholder groups on a regular basis, and will continue coming to talk to people like yourselves as we have more to update on. On the dependability side, I will just say here, like when we site a module, we are intending for that module to be in operation for at least 30 years. We are aiming to be a valued partner to this community and a preferred employer for the next several decades, and understand that we need to show people that they can trust us in order to do that. And then the last point here around preservation, we've engaged with several local chapters of NGOs, including the Nature Conservancy, the Wyoming Outdoor Council. We are starting to talk more with groups like Game and Fish as well, to make sure that we are taking their perspectives into account as we site and build out our own plans. We understand that this is quite important to the community and want to make sure that we are preserving, as it says, Wyoming's natural beauty. That is all I had, unless we want to go into some of the technical stuff, but otherwise I can pause for questions or hand it over to Alicia if we wanted to wait until both of us have spoken to do Q&A.
I got a couple questions.
Sure.
First question is that when you're looking at sites, are you using already drilled sites that have already, old gas wells or something, or you drilling new sites?
I think on the drilling perspective, that's probably a better question for Alicia, because their focus will be on drilling and operation of the Class 6 injection wells they've applied for. I will say, though, that to the extent possible, we are hoping to site on previously disturbed land that does not have other use cases like recreation.
And second question is, of all carbon capture, how much of a difference does it really make? If you take 1 million tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, what does it actually change in the atmosphere?
Megan, do you want me to answer that question?
Sure, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, the light in here obviously is a little, isn't optimal. So, 1 million tons isn't going to make a big
No.
difference. The goal here is to build a global industry that's taking out 50 gigatons of CO2 per year by 2050. And these first projects are just helping to demonstrate and commercialize that technology that we believe needs to kind of get to that scale by that time. Yesterday, the Department of Energy released its direct air capture hub FOAs. So that's $3.7 billion that the federal government is looking to invest in these types of technologies because they believe it's important to get to that scale at that time frame. We are working with the Wyoming Energy Authority, the University of Wyoming, and the Wyoming Business Council to see about bringing some of those federal funds to the state as well. But yes,
Yeah, all
this
for
is.
that. I just was like, I sit there and watch and I'm like, what change is it actually going to do? We got China, and this is just personal. You got China that's dumping really nasty gas or carbon into the atmosphere. And then we've changed up pretty good here in the US, not putting out as much as we used to. What change actually happens in the atmosphere? If we get to the 50 gigatons, is there still going to be a change?
Yeah,
Is it gonna be-
but you're
is
going
it
to need,
be measurable?
I would say it will be measurable as long as people are reducing their CO2. I mean, to your point, if China isn't doing anything to reduce their CO2 and countries like India, then you're going to need a lot more than 50 gigatons a year, right? And so there are a lot of things that need to all work together at the same time in order for us to address climate change. This is just one piece of a really complex puzzle.
Oh, it's a big puzzle. And then
Yeah.
my other question is there still the opportunity for the third, I guess, second use CO2 is actually a used gas commercially in the sequester, in the absorbing of it? Is there a market to put some of that back out, as it's used in commercial purposes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at use cases that are permanent storage of the CO2, such as using that CO2 to make concrete, or things that are really hard to abate, like sustainable aviation fuel. But I think there's going to certainly be a lot of other uses of CO2. And you're going to also see a lot of, these projects aren't meant to replace CCS going on point source projects. So CCS going on a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas-fired power plant or other industrial emissions. And some of those may be a little bit more cost effective to use that CO2 to say make food grade CO2 to go in to soft drinks or, to use in food packaging. So yeah, I mean, the CO2 market is going to be hopefully big and complex, and there's going to be a lot of projects that are happening, and they're all going to have a bit of different dynamics over how that CO2 gets used.
Thank you. Just some curious personal questions for me.
No, absolutely. Again, this is an education, right? I mean, this is a
Right.
new industry we're talking about building. And so, that is one of the things we're always happy to talk about, where do we think is the carbon management industry going, and how can we all kind of work on this together?
So I got a quick question. So who pays you? Who pays? It's not the government, it's individual companies?
Yes, so we do get 45Q tax credits, and that is $180 a ton, and that goes through 20. So it's the way the tax credit is structured is you get it for 12 years, and the project needs to start by 2032.
So you're getting tax money. You're getting tax. You're not getting. I guess my question is.
We'll get carbon removed, but we'll also sell out. So our costs are greater than $180 a ton, right? So we need more. And yes, it's corporations. So it's large corporations who have made net zero commitments. So they're saying, I'm going to get to net zero. And in order to do that, I'm going to reduce my emissions as much as possible, but there are going to be some scope 3 or kind of hard to abate emissions.
So do they get billed? Do these companies get billed from their emissions? Is that what their
how
their
do you-
plus, their stake in the game?
So this is on the voluntary carbon market, which means there's no government regulation that is requiring them to make a net zero commitment, but they have decided to. And if you are a corporation who has decided to do something and publicly said that, then that has effects from a Security Exchange Commission, right? So if, there are some investors who believe that corporations who have made net zero commitments are going to perform financially better over the next coming decades. And that could be because, there's fines that are put on them. But so it's those companies and we're dealing with them directly. So we will remove the CO2. We will prove to them through flow meters and reporting that we remove the CO2, and we will sell them a certificate, and they will share that with their investors to prove that they have made their net zero commitments.
So you have a board of chairman, the board of commissioner, or whoever you're dealing with, a board for a publicly traded company. They're saying, oh, we're spending $10 million on this. What's our benefit? Are we going to do it? And then you're going to find out, oh, these guys don't want to pay anymore. Then we have all these structures around Sweetwater County as an eyesore because it didn't work. I was just kind of curious where the funding, I think it's a great idea. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't want to find out, oh, they're not going to pay it anymore. You guys are out of business and we have all these structures.
So one of the good things about our projects is they are modular, right? So we will only make a final investment decision to build more modules when we have pre-sold those credits. So we have already are in kind of deals to pre-sell tens of millions of dollars of these credits. And we will only make these final investment decisions to build these structures when we believe we've kind of pre-sold the credits. So certainly in any business, anything could happen, right? In 10 years. Yes, maybe we decide that the market has changed and, this business doesn't make sense. We don't believe that. There's no indication. Every kind of report says that there's actually only going to be more demand. And even California is talking about introducing legislation to require companies. So that would be in the compliance market, not the voluntary market, that would require companies who are still emitting to get carbon removal credits. There's talk of, there's been federal legislation that's been introduced where the federal government would buy carbon removal credits. So we don't believe that's going to happen. But if it does, we do have a remediation fund to essentially, remove these sites, kind of a backup plan in terms of that. And so that will all be involved in kind of how we look at permitting and how we share kind of future plans.
So typically, say, for instance, the county required you to put a bond up for remediation, you would be willing to do something like that?
Yeah, certainly those are all kind of things that we'll
Okay.
kind of continue to look at.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions or?
I've seen your presentation and I appreciate the work you've done with the University of Wyoming as well on the locations and finding these spots that they're going to utilize. One of my questions is so you'll be having units that you'll be bringing into here, your pods, but it'll have the canisters, or where are you going to collect the carbon?
So one of the great things about direct air capture is that it can basically be sited anywhere. Carbon numbers are low enough in the atmosphere, and there is sufficient mixing such that the CO2 levels in the atmosphere here in LA are actually very similar to Wyoming. I'm based in Los Angeles. We have plenty of other things in the atmosphere around here that make it a lot worse than someplace like Wyoming. But as for carbon dioxide specifically, the levels are pretty similar across the world. So we will be collecting CO2 from the area around Wyoming, but given the mixing, it will pretty much reach equilibrium with everywhere else extremely quickly, if not instantaneously.
Was your question more on how the technology works, like how it's contained, or I kind of interpret the question?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I understand how it's contained and I understand what the geology we have to contain it, to keep it from getting back up into the atmosphere. But no, I was just kind of curious of where it was going to be collected. And so, yeah, so instead of being outside a power plant or something like that, we're going to collect it right here.
Yep.
And then you're going to inject it into the ground. but I'm also that guy that, I mean, a tree will collect 48 pounds, I think, a year, a mature tree will. But trees have this cool thing where they give off oxygen that we breathe. And so I'm wondering where our benefit is here. If we're collecting it out of our air, you're saying it's going to equalize it out, but we're injecting it here into our system, so to speak.
Yeah, and we are supportive of other carbon dioxide removal technologies, including more nature-based ones like reforestation. We are going to need all of those approaches in order to get to that kind of 50 gigatons per year that, I talked about. And so there are some places in the world where that reforestation makes a lot more sense. And there are some, geographies where direct air capture will make more sense. Certainly one of the concerns around reforestation, and I'm not saying this is preventing us from doing this, but we don't know what the climate's going to look like in a decade. And so, what if the climate does result in more wildfires or different kind of climate zones that will degrade trees in a different way? So, that's why we need all of these approaches to have a lot of resilience as we try to deal with this problem. And these different solutions will kind of provide that resilience to I would say, our climate balance.
Thank you.
Rob, anything? No? Awesome. Did Alicia want to say anything, or was that? I wasn't sure.
Yes. So hi, Alicia Summers. So to bring it full circle, we are actually the carbon storage developers, and I have a couple of slides. I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time, but if y'all want to go through a quick presentation and then got some of the questions that you had previously, hope to answer some of those, or does that work for you all?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Let me try to share my presentation. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so my name is Alicia Summers. I'm one of the founding partners here at Frontier Carbon Solutions. I'm responsible for the subsurface reservoir studies, land, and permitting side of things. And then to bring it full circle, like I said, we provide the transportation and sequestration services to industry partners like Project Bison and Carbon Capture Inc. So we are a carbon storage development company. We have a full team of engineers and project managers that are dedicated to the permanent storage of CO2. We were founded in 2021, and although that sounds a little new, we all have long experience in oil and gas. Most of us have Wyoming experience, and those are the same tools and skill sets that we've used to determine, ideal location for our carbon storage hub and determine the reservoir qualities that you need for a CO2 storage field. We're backed by Telwater Capital. They have about a $5 billion assets under management across the energy spectrum, and they're focused on transitional and infrastructure projects across the lower 48. So to hone in on why we located or why we're focusing on, we kind of, early on we were looking at our project, developing it, the whole US was on the table, but it was quickly determined that there's basically no competition with Wyoming, and it rose to the top. And there's a multitude of reasons, and just to circle on a few. Number one, it's Wyoming's resources are rich in minerals, and that goes across oil and gas, coal, helium, trona, uranium, and then also the skilled workforce that goes hand in hand, and the know-how to work those resources. And then number two, it's an industrial corridor. It supports power and nat gas, processing hydrogen, and the emerging nuclear. And then number three, the Greater Green River Basin. It's home to premier world-class geology, prime candidate for CO2 storage. And then what's not mentioned here is, but it's extremely important to note, is that Wyoming's governing body, they were so thoughtful and proactive in establishing early on important legislation and rules and guidelines to attract carbon storage developers like ourselves. So the Sweetwater Carbon Storage Hub, that's what we're calling our first hub. Not too creative, but we're a bunch of engineers and technicals. So that's the best we could come up with. We're starting small by storing about 1.5 million tons per year of CO2, but we plan on growing pretty quickly to 10 million tons by 2030. And so we've already got expansion programs in play as we achieve these targets. And then to circle back to the why, to answer some of your questions, CO2, it's non-combustible, non-flammable, and it's present in the atmosphere. Just like you said, we breathe it out and trees breathe it in. However, it's ever growing with industrialization, and as we produce hydrocarbons from the earth, CO2 gets produced as well. And whether we all agree or not, market sentiment drives a lot of the industries in the area and therefore the revenue. And they're increasingly pressuring companies to go green and either become carbon neutral or even carbon negative. And then here at Frontier, we recognize that not all processes can easily be decarbonized. So we're here to provide a solution for industrial emitters to reach their abatement goals. And so how does it work? You heard a little bit about Project Bison. They're just one partner that we envision storing CO2 within our hub. We envision another set of partners to be industrial emitters local to the area. And so, the capture technology will be installed and integrated at those facilities, and those operators will be responsible for that portion of the capture. And this equipment literally diverts the emissions that are coming off the smokestacks and takes it through a series of towers to separate out that CO2. Once that gets CO2 separated out, once it gets separated out, it goes through compressors where we turn that atmospheric gaseous CO2 into what we call dense phase CO2. And that just means it's more of a liquid form, and that's easier to transport and store downhole. The capture technology is being designed to reduce use of water and integrated and streamlined with their existing processes so that they symbiotically work together. And then let's see, and then to move on to the next slide, and hopefully this answers some of your questions on Class 6 wells. Class 6 well is what we're permitting to store what we call anthropogenic CO2, and that's just CO2 that comes straight from industrial facilities. It's the newest class, definitely the most robust and most comprehensive. There's 6 across the board. I'll note that even though there's Class 4 noted here, that's for disposal of hazardous and radioactive waste, and thankfully the EPA banned that back in the early 80s. So we don't have any of those in the US. So Class 6, going back to my note previously, how proactive Wyoming was, in 2020, the Wyoming DEQ was successful in getting primacy for permitting these Class 6 wells. And if they hadn't done that, I would say this process to make a project commercial in a reasonable time frame would not be achieved. It just would be impossible because these well classes, Class 6 wells, are permitted by the EPA in every other state besides Wyoming and North Dakota. And there, those processes can take, upwards of 5 years or then some. So these wells are, the DEQ is very conscious in making sure that these guidelines were established to protect mainly the USDWs. You don't want CO2 encroaching on any of the drinking water sources. And you want to make sure that wherever we determine this goes, that it stays there permanently and it's not coming out. And then also, it's monitored. I would say the monitoring that goes into these Class 6 wells is far more comprehensive than any other well. We will be studying the plume, what we call the CO2 plume, in real time, providing those reports back to the state, just to make sure that not only does it, make sure that we protect the USDWs, that it doesn't interfere with any active oil and gas production in the area as well. And then financial responsibility. This is another comprehensive, very robust guideline here that we will have to meet. We will have to establish bonding and insurance, not just for the drilling and construction or even operations, for post operations as well. So you and I will be long gone, and our bonding that we've set aside early on will still be there to make sure in a downside scenario, something happens, that the resources are protected in the area. And then also, if this well needs to be plugged and abandoned and we're gone, there's already money set aside to make sure that everything gets remediated. And so the CO2, yeah, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
No, I think we're good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So how does the CO2 stay where it's at? So number one, it's not mentioned here, but depth. To keep that CO2 from going back into its gaseous phase, you want it to stay in that liquid phase, and depth is a huge component. So we're going to inject this deeper than, put this in a saline sand 13,000 feet. And so then the next line of trapping the CO2 is structural. We have cap rocks and seals that protect the CO2 from migrating out of the reservoir. And think of clay, really impermeable type of soil that's going to keep it down there. And then also, if in the area that we're looking at, thankfully, we don't have any faults or any other structural complexities, but those also lend themselves to keeping CO2 exactly where it's going and making sure it stays there. And then residual, as CO2 starts to migrate through the reservoir, it displaces the fluids that are currently there, and it starts to get trapped into those tiny pores as well. And then eventually solubility. So as it gets trapped, it will bind to the formation like a magnet, and then it'll get dissolved into that water. So think carbonated sodas or carbonated water. And then eventually it'll start to mineralize. Over time, it works with the minerals that are in the reservoir, and it becomes a carbonate material itself. And this happens over 50, 60, 70, hundreds of years. And then to let you know what this looks like, this is a bit of a cartoon, but this was taken from one of our earlier models. This is exactly what it looks like in the reservoir that we're targeting. This is the Nugget Sandstone Reservoir in the area. And it looks like, I call this either an upside down wedding cake or an umbrella. And this is all because of just the components and reservoir qualities of the rock. And then over time, this will start to seep down into the reservoir and become permanent. So we've, like Megan said, we have submitted 3 Class 6 permits to the Wyoming DEQ, and those are currently being reviewed. That takes quite a bit of time before we'll even get a permit to construct. And then we also, once we get that permit to construct, we'll have to go and drill a well, and then make sure that the findings we get from the data we receive validates our Class 6 permit. And then only then, after review with the DEQ, will the DEQ and public comment, will the DEQ issue a permit to inject? So there's a long runway ahead of us before we are actually operational, but we envision this to happen hopefully by the end of next year. And then we've also launched, in partnership with some of our industrial partners, we've launched FEED and engineering studies with Shell CANSOLV to develop the technology with the industrial emitters. And then you've heard from Megan at Carbon Capture Inc. We've partnered with them as well to be the first direct air capture to store really in all of North America. So I'll stop sharing now if I can figure that out. There we go. And then happy to answer any of your questions. And I think one specifically, and I'll probably jump into this really quick and then answer any other questions. But going back to your initial question about are we using P&A or plug and abandoned wells that have previously been drilled. So we are doing our best to use those. In fact, in our project that we have outlined, I'm working with the state to try to use one that has been plugged and abandoned for several years as a monitor well. The only reason why we would drill new wells is because CO2 can be very corrosive. And so you have to be very careful of the equipment. I call it the jewelry that you use to drill these wells. We have to use a chrome steel blend. And that's to make sure, and then anti-corrosive cement as well, from all the way down to the total depth up to the surface. And that's to make sure that the CO2 doesn't work its way into any drinking water sources. So going back to your question, we're doing our best to use wells that have already been there. But for the most part, these injectors are gonna have to be brand new drills.
Thank you.
Huh?
That was my question.
That was your question. So is there any other, and maybe I'm just out there, I don't know. So is this the first project or is there anywhere else in the States that are already doing this? Anywhere?
So there are some projects that are already underway across the US. There was one that was quite famous called Petronova in Texas, and that was getting CO2, capturing CO2 and sequestering it into enhanced oil recovery into existing oil fields. That has not been ongoing for quite some time. They had some rough issues there. They are actively the longest project ongoing today is in Illinois. It's an ADM facility. They're taking CO2 from ethanol production and storing it in 2 Class 6 wells there in Illinois into the Mount Simon formation. They've been really successful at doing that. And then also in North Dakota, the Red Trail is an ethanol facility, and they permitted, and they are currently actively injecting CO2 underground from ethanol facility as well. And then there's multiple permits across, mostly in Louisiana, some in California. They're trying to get permits for these Class 6 wells, but those processes are through the EPA, and we envision those to take quite some time.
We have a lot of trona that's very permeable, you know, how do you guarantee it doesn't, I don't know.
No, yeah, that's a great point. And in fact, we are very cognizant. We were actually working with the trona operators to make sure that we are well outside the trona mining leasing area. So our project is at the corners of Lincoln, Sweetwater, and Uinta. Probably about 5 miles outside the sodium mining leasing area, and actually outside the trona ore area. So we were very cognizant when we were working and doing our geology and subsurface work that we were not by any means interfering with any of those operations. And we are going well below any trona. I think the deepest trona, and I could be wrong, I think the deepest trona is being mined at 2,500, 3,000 feet, and we're going down to 13,000, 14,000 feet with our CO2. There's also just, you guys are probably cognizant of this too, but subsidence is quite a bit, that's a big issue in the trona area as well. We wanted to make sure that we stayed away from any subsidence issues as well.
Mark, did you have something? No? Okay.
I'm good.
Anybody else? Awesome. Thank you so much, because I was out of town when you guys were here and I did miss it. And I know a couple of you have seen it. I have not. So it answered a lot of my questions that I had. I'm sure there's still lots more out there, but awesome. Thank you for taking your time to explain this to us. I do appreciate that. Thank you, Eric, for setting this up.
Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah, feel free, reach out if you have any questions, and always happy to answer them.
Perfect. Does anybody else have anything before we sign off? No? All right. Thank you. All right, guys. Is that the conclusion? Or Eric, do you have, Megan, anything to add?
Madam Chair, I don't.
No? All right. Hearing none, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. It is 11:45. Thank you.